The coyote had a collar, but it had never been owned. Amelia never called for help, but tonight she called me. The crate was empty when I reached her truck, but the coyote was already inside, watching. It wasn't the first animal she'd stopped for that month. But it was the first one that made her call me from the side of the road at 10:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, which is unusual because Amelia never called anyone during a rescue. She'd handle it herself and tell you about it later, maybe, if you asked. So when my phone buzzed and I saw her name, I knew something was off before I even answered. "Can you bring the transport crate from the back of my truck?" she said. "No, hello. That wasn't like her either. What's wrong with yours? I've got it out. But I need the backup. There's 2 of them. 2. That's the thing about coyotes in Los Angeles, they're everywhere, in the canyons and the golf courses and the vacant lots near the 405, but you almost never see them in pairs by the roadside at night. Not like this. She told me later that the smaller one was already dead when she arrived. Hit and run, most likely, the kind that leaves a body on the shoulder and a trail of red in the headlights. The other one, the one she couldn't stop thinking about, was still alive. Lying next to the body. Not running. Not hiding. Just lying there like it was waiting for something. And when she got out of her truck, it didn't move. Right there, that's when she noticed the collar. A thin leather band, worn and faded, with a small silver tag. She couldn't read what was engraved on it until she got closer, and by then she was already kneeling on the asphalt, the engine still running behind her, the hazard lights casting alternating shadows across the coyote's side. The tag said Gato. Gato. Spanish for cat. Someone had named a coyote after the one thing coyotes are supposed to hunt. Here's what matters. Amelia didn't tell me any of this until 3 weeks later. What she told me that night on the phone was, "I need the backup crate," and when I got there, when I pulled up behind her truck and saw the silhouette of the animal in the glow of my own headlights, I understood why she hadn't said more. Because the coyote wasn't just lying there. It was watching her. Not with fear. Not with the kind of wild alertness you expect from an animal that's been hit or trapped. It was watching her like it knew her. Like it had been waiting for someone to stop. I've thought about that night a lot since then. Not because of what happened next, the rescue itself was textbook, really. We got the coyote into the crate, drove it to the rehab center in Topanga before midnight, handed it over to the night staff. That part went smoothly. What stayed with me was the look on Amelia's face when she finally stood up from the asphalt, stroking the animal's flank through the crate's bars, her fingers dark with blood she hadn't bothered to wipe off. She didn't say anything. She just stood there in the headlights, and I remember thinking, she's already lost this one. She just doesn't know it yet. But she did know it. She told me later she knew it the moment she saw the collar. The real mistake here is thinking that knowing something early makes it easier. It doesn't. It just gives you more time to prepare for the moment when you have to admit it out loud. And Amelia was a professional. She knew the signs. The internal bleeding you can't see, the way an animal goes quiet when its body is shutting down, the specific quality of stillness that means the shock is too deep. She knew all of it. She just kept hoping anyway. The coyote, Gato, though nobody at the center called it that, they called it the Mulholland male, the way you do with wildlife to keep your distance, died at 3:14 a.m. This I only know because she texted me. 3-digit characters, 314. And then nothing for 6 days. That was Amelia's version of grief. She didn't talk about it. She didn't post about it. She just showed up at the next rescue and the one after that, her alarm red truck with the electric yellow-green lettering pulling over at the same stretches of road, scanning for the next animal that needed her. She wasn't looking for thanks. She was looking for the next animal that needed her. But the collar, the one no one wanted to talk about, was still sitting in the center's evidence bin, and Amelia had 6 days to decide whether to turn it over or bury the whole thing with the coyote. But here's what nobody in the neighborhood knew. What I only found out because I helped her clean out the truck a month later, and I found the collar tag in the cup holder. She'd kept it. And when I asked her about it, casually, like, "Oh, you kept that," she told me she'd looked up the tag number. The county registration database. It was a pet license. Issued in Pacoima, 6 years ago, to a family who'd probably raised Gato from a pup, fed him kibble, named him after something they thought was funny, and then at some point, maybe when he got too big, maybe when he started acting like a wild animal instead of a pet, they'd driven him up to the canyon and let him out. People do that. They think it's kinder than the alternative. They think the coyote will find its people, its pack, its wild home. They don't know what happens to a domestic animal released into a territory that already has its own established populations. They don't know that other coyotes will attack it, drive it out, that it will spend years alone on the edges of neighborhoods, scavenging, never quite wild enough to thrive and never quite tame enough to come back. They don't know that it will eventually die on the side of the road next to a stranger because it never learned to cross at the right time. What strikes me at this point is that Amelia could have let it go. She could have said wild animal, collared or not, nothing we could have done and moved on. That's what most people in her line of work would have done, eventually. But she didn't. She drove to Pacoima. She knocked on the door of the address on the registration. The house was still standing, still had the same plastic flamingo in the front yard. A woman answered. Amelia said she was from Coastal Wildlife Rescue and asked about a coyote named Gato. The woman said, "We haven't seen him in years. He ran away." And Amelia, who is not a confrontational person, who rescues animals because she cannot stand to see them suffer, Amelia said, "He didn't run away. He was wearing a collar. With a tag. That you registered." This is exactly where everything changes. Because the woman didn't deny it. She didn't apologize either. She said, "He was too much. What were we supposed to do?" And then she closed the door. Amelia stood on that porch for a full minute. Have you ever stood in stunned silence after a rescue or moment of care, knowing you gave everything but still wondering if it was enough? She told me that later, too. She said she counted to 60 in her head, waiting for the door to open again, waiting for the woman to come back and say something, anything that would make sense of what she'd done. But the door stayed closed. The plastic flamingo stayed still. And eventually Amelia walked back to her truck and drove home. The coyote had been wearing that collar for 6 years. 6 years of living in the canyon alone, never finding a pack, never being reclaimed, never quite fitting anywhere. 6 years of eating from trash cans and drinking from storm drains and crossing roads at the wrong time. And somewhere in those 6 years, someone must have seen him. Someone must have noticed the collar, the thin leather band with the silver tag, and wondered. But nobody did anything. I don't know why that story hit me the way it did. Maybe because I'd seen that coyote myself, a few times, without knowing. A shape in the brush near the turnout where people park to watch the sunset. A shadow slipping under the guardrail. I'd never thought much of it because coyotes are part of the landscape here, and you learn to see them without really seeing them. But after Amelia told me the rest, I couldn't unsee him. Couldn't stop thinking about the years he spent out there, alone, wearing a tag that would never bring anyone to find him. Amelia took a week off after that. First time in 3 years. She went to her sister's place in Ventura, and I heard through the neighbor who heard from her sister's neighbor that she spent most of it walking on the beach, picking up trash, throwing it away. Not talking much. Just moving. When she came back, she painted the trim on the crate in the back of her truck. Electric yellow-green, to match the lettering. She said it was so people could see it better at night. But I think she just needed to do something with her hands. The rescue that broke her wasn't the coyote. It was the door that stayed closed. It was the woman who didn't come back. It was the 6 years of nobody asking the question. I was there the morning she got the call about the fox in Griffith Park. A juvenile female, caught in a discarded fishing net near the old zoo. Tangled so badly the net had cut through the fur to the skin on both hind legs. A hiker had found her at sunrise, and by the time Amelia arrived the fox had stopped struggling. Not because she'd given up. Because she was conserving energy. That's what Amelia told me later. She was waiting. She knew help was coming or she knew it wasn't. Either way, she was ready. And then she did it again. She got out of the truck, crouched low, and started talking. Soft. In Spanish. The same way she'd talked to the coyote on Mulholland that night. I don't know what she said. I don't think she knows either. It's not the words that matter. It's the voice. The specific frequency of being unafraid. The fox let her cut the net. Let her lift her into the crate. Didn't bite, didn't snap, didn't even growl. Just watched her with those dark animal eyes that hold more than we give them credit for. And Amelia, who had every reason to be tired by then, every reason to be bitter or cold or closed off, Amelia just drove her to the center and started the process all over again. I asked her once, months later, why she keeps doing it. Why she doesn't find something easier, something that doesn't end like this half the time. She was sitting on the tailgate of her truck, the crate empty beside her, the afternoon light catching the yellow-green paint she'd been so careful with. She looked at me like I'd asked the wrong question. "You think I do this for the ones that make it," she said. "I do it for the ones that don't. Because somebody has to witness it. Somebody has to show up and say, you were here. You mattered." That's the part one can't forget. She didn't say it like a lesson. She said it like a fact, tired and simple and true. And then she closed the tailgate, got in her truck, and drove toward the next call. The fox survived, by the way. 3 weeks in rehab, and then a release up near the Verdugo Mountains. I wasn't there for it. But Amelia told me that when she opened the crate, the fox didn't run right away. She stood at the edge of the opening, blinking in the sun, and then she turned her head and looked back. At Amelia. Just for a second. Should Amelia have left the coyote alone instead of trying to rescue it after its companion was killed? And then she was gone. But that look the fox gave Amelia wasn't gratitude, it was a reminder of the coyote's collar, and the question nobody on Mulholland Drive had dared to ask yet. I've never seen a release. I've only imagined it. But I've thought about that second, the one where the animal pauses before leaving, more than I probably should. I wonder if the fox knew. Not in the way we know things. But in the way that a creature who has been held, fed, healed, and then released knows the difference between being saved and being let go. Amelia said she doesn't expect them to remember her. She doesn't expect gratitude or recognition or any of the things that make human relationships complicated. She expects nothing. And that's the gift, I think. Not the rescue itself. The expectation of nothing in return. But I also think about the coyote. The one she couldn't save. The one with the collar that said Gato, the one who waited 6 years for someone to come back, and when they didn't, he waited on the side of the road anyway, next to a stranger who looked like him. I think about what Amelia said about witnessing. About showing up so that someone, something, knows they were here. That tag is still in her cup holder. I saw it last week. I didn't ask about it. I didn't need to. It's not a souvenir. It's a reminder. Not of the animal that died, and not of the people who let him go. It's a reminder that the door stays closed if you don't knock. And sometimes it stays closed even if you do. But you knock anyway. That's the part one keeps thinking about. The fox paused. The coyote waited. And Amelia just keeps showing up, with her truck and her crate and her steady hands, looking for the next animal that needs her. Not because it's easy. Because somebody has to. And here's the question I'd ask you, if you were sitting next to me, what are you willing to witness? Not save. Not fix. Just be present for? Because I think that's what Amelia would ask. I think that's the only thing she'd want you to take from any of this. The coyote had a collar. That was the first thing nobody wanted to talk about. But someone did talk about it, eventually. She knocked on a door in Pacoima, and the door didn't open, but she knocked anyway. And next time, maybe she'll knock again. That's the thing about Amelia. She doesn't stop. The fox paused. The coyote waited. And somewhere in the canyons above Los Angeles, there's a crease of electric yellow-green on a transport crate that catches the light just so, marking the spot where one woman decided that showing up was enough. Not because she could save them all. Because she refused to let them disappear unnoticed. That tag in the cup holder, I see it every time I get in her truck. A small silver circle, worn at the edges, the engraved letters almost smooth now from years of handling. It sits next to a loose receipt from a gas station in Topanga and a pen that stopped working 3 months ago. It doesn't belong there. But neither did the coyote. Neither do most of the things we carry with us. Amelia doesn't talk about what it means. She doesn't have to. The tag says Gato, and that's enough. A name for something that was never quite wild and never quite tame, that spent 6 years in the space between, that died next to a stranger on a road where people drive too fast. A name for something that was loved, once, maybe, before it became too much. I asked her once if she'd ever go back to that house in Pacoima. She said, no. Then she said, I already said what I needed to say. The door was the answer. And that's the part that I think about when I can't sleep. Not the rescue. Not the death. The answer. The door that closed and stayed closed. Because sometimes the truth costs more than the lie that replaced it, but keeping it is the only thing that lets you stand in front of the next closed door and still raise your hand to knock. The fox is out there somewhere. The coyote isn't. And Amelia is still driving her truck through the canyons, scanning the shoulders, watching for movement in the brush, her hand steady on the wheel and the tag in the cup holder worn smooth by all the miles. I don't know what you'd call that. I don't know if there's a word for it. But I know it when I see it, and I saw it that night on Mulholland, when she knelt on the asphalt and said the animal's name for the first time. Gato. The name nobody else had said out loud in 6 years. She was the first. And she was the last. And that's the whole story, really. That's all of it. That coyote named Gato, would you have said its name out loud? If that moment with the collar made your chest tighten, hit like for that quiet ache. If you're the one who looks at the closed door and still knocks, this is your channel.